Welcome to this episode of the Yahowah blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. It is Wednesday, the 10th of September, 2025, here in the glorious waning summer months here in the Caribbean Sea. My great pleasure to be with you. We're going to continue our review of all things we can learn about the harvest and the great sacrifice that is scheduled for Teruah. Teruah, your pleasure, can be celebrated beginning on the 22nd of September or the 23rd, depending if you prefer the astronomical or the observational method of determining dates. This one is right there at the place where I don't think a valid argument can be made one way or the other. You're more than welcome to choose which one you prefer for this particular year. It is, however, Teruah. It is not Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a despicable rabbinic corruption of God's instructions. In fact, the rabbis are wrong on every one of Yahowah's 7 annual meetings. And so if you are celebrating high holy days along with the rabbis and you think that this is the last month of the year and that the new moon on the first day of the 7th month is actually beginning of a new year, and that it's Rosh Hashanah and not Teruah, and that you are prepared to twirl chickens over your head come Kippurim, and you think it's a day of affliction when you should suffer in some way, when it is actually a day of reconciliations. And if you are awaiting the return of an unknown or just the arrival of an unknown Messiah, and you don't know that it's Dowd David that is returning on Kippurim as a result of what transpires on Teruah in 2033, which is year 6,000. Yeah, that's another issue with the old rabbinical calendar. Maimonides got that wrong too by 197 years, and it's obvious. I mean, for him to have published that and for Jews to continue to believe it, it just shows that in religion, stupid matters and stupid trumps intelligence. It is year 6,000 in 2033. Dowd and Yahowah, that happens to be God's name. I know the rabbis got that one wrong too. They called him Hashem. They actually think that Hashem is a damn name. They're so absolutely lost. Even when God says, listen, Yisrael, Yahowah, your God is one, they change that so that they replace Yahowah's name with Adonai, and rather than listening, they blabber. It becomes their lead prayer. It is, there's just nothing that is sensible in the religion of Judaism. I think in many ways it's dumber than Christianity, and many ways dumber than Islam, which of course the rabbis created both of those two religions. So maybe they were slight upgrades over Judaism because they had more practice. I'm not so sure that's the case. Nonetheless, this is where we are. I want our listeners to capitalize on what Yahowah intends through Teruah. This particular Teruah is just an annual celebration of it. We have a number of wacko pastors out there that are saying this month there's going to be a rapture. This is when Jesus is coming back. You better be ready for the rapture. There's no rapture. Paul was a nincompoop. Paul actually got the prophecy wrong. He picked the wrong date. He thought that the next harvest would be Trumpets, Teruah, when in fact the next harvest is Shabuwa, sevens. And that's because he had claimed that the birth of his mythical church took place on Shabuwa, and they called that Pentecost. But that's utter nonsense. Nothing that is written in Acts 2 regarding this time turned out to be accurate. In fact, it's ludicrous because the proof text is Yoel, and Yoel is speaking of these last days and the time of trouble in Israel that we're about to enter. And Paul, of course, being demon-possessed, said that this rapture, his harpozo, was going to occur during his lifetime. Yeah, well, he only missed that by 2,000 years, with a couple of thousand years amongst enemies. Uh, so, uh, no, there will be no rapture. It's not a harpazo. It is a gleaning, actually. Shabuwa, which is the next mikre to be fulfilled. That will be a harvest, a Qatsyr of God's covenant family, of which there will be no Christians, no religious Jews, no Haredim, no Muslims, no Marxists. It will be only of unreligious people who have chosen to accept the 5 terms and conditions of the covenant and who attend the Moedim, these annual meetings, to be with God as they were intended, which would preclude all practitioners of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and of course, Marxism. So it is a very small group of people. When God etched in stone the second statement, where he begged people, his people, not to be religious, and that's all the second statement says, is don't be religious. The first one says, by the way, Yahowah is my name, it's my only name, and if you are going to associate any other name with me, you will not continue to exist. And that I'm a liberator is what he said in the first one. Therefore, he can't be a Lord. And in the second statement, it's just don't be religious. And he finally says that fathers corrupt their sons to the 3rd and 4th generation, and that there will be thousands who will receive his mercy, and they will do so by observing these conditions of the covenant. Thousands amongst billions, folks, is 1 in a million. And so that's the number of people that are going to be subject to this upcoming harvest on Shabuwa. And following that, and those dates are set as well. There are 2 Shabuas in play because a lot to be accomplished on this date. It is the date for the beginning of the time of Israel's troubles. It is the date that commences the time that Israel is dissected at her waist, and a large swath of Israel is given away to the Islamic State, and that Fakistinian state will come back to harm Israel to the point that millions of Jews are going to die as a result of being hoodwinked by the great betrayer into giving up their heartland. And that great betrayer is none other than Donald Trump. The prophecies are exceedingly clear in this regard. That's the first 2 aspects of Shabuwa. They will both take place on or before the 22nd of May, 2026. And then the follow-on will be Shabuwa the following year, which will be the harvest of Shabuwa. That will be the 11th of June, 2027. Both dates are Shabbats because Yahowah does his best work on the Shabbat. Shabbat is not do nothing day. It's do your best day. It's a day that rather than focusing on your own occupation, that you focus on the work of Yahowah and contribute to it. This then means that the 3 fall Moedim, these restoring witnesses of the eternal meetings, they will transpire at the end of the time of Yaakov's trouble, 7 years from the celebration of Shabuwa in 2026. And that means that it will be the Teruah that is celebrated in 2033, year 6,000 Yah. The Gleaning, not Rapture, it's a Lakot. On that date is of olives. So the pastor got that wrong too. So did Paul. Olives represent Yisrael. You see, Shabuwa is a wheat's harvest. It represents 2 types of wheat, just as there are 2 loaves that are waved on that date. And those 2 loaves represent both the 2 houses of Yisrael and Yehudah, but also it is a time that both Goyim and Yehudim are brought into the 7th dimension by Yahowah. When we get to Teruah, though, New Testament and rabbis have it all screwed up. It is a gleaning, which means a secondary harvest. That's where you take a stick, and Yahowah's stick is his choder, and you whack the olive tree of the remaining fruit on it. And what God says, there'll be 2 or 3 olives from the uppermost branches. That represents Yehudim. And 4 or 5 from the lowest branches They represent Yisrael because he specifically says those branches have been cut away. And it was Yisrael that became the lost 10 tribes because of the Assyrian assault. Therefore, that is an olive harvest. Olives represent Israel, and so there will be no goyams, no Christian harvest at that time. And it is going to take place on the 23rd and 24th of September 2033. It will occur to the backdrop of a full solar eclipse. The second day of Teruah, which is one 24-hour period, but it begins at sunset with the Lakat on the 23rd, which is a Friday evening, and it will continue through the Shabbat of the 24th, a Saturday, and on that day you will have the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah. This is another thing that the rabbis and Christians all get wrong, because they have rendered Adamah Parah a red heifer, as if somehow God is going to accept the sacrifice of a red cow. But that is not what Adamah Parah means. It is not what the prophecies pertaining to it say. The Adamah Parah happens to be a blood-ready man from the earth, Adamah, who is a productive bull. The metaphor all the way through Yahweh's testimony are three animals, all representing men. So it's Passover, for example, was fulfilled by Dowd in the second of three lives. He's represented by the Passover lamb, but it's Dowd, his physical body, and his second of third lives was sacrificed. And he represents both the ram and the lamb. And the next happens to be a bull. And that bull is the one who will, as a man, but with a bullish personality and attitude, he's the one that will trample down all manner of serpents and demonic people between now and the time that he offers his life as a sacrifice for the children of Israel. It's the story of the Adamah Parah that purges the guilt from the adulterous woman that is religious Israel before Dowd returns, so that Israel can be betrothed to her king on Kippurim, which is the day that Dowd and Yahowah return. Now, they're not going to return. You're not going to witness that return unless your religiosity is nil, unless you are someone who has been slightly misled, as opposed to one who is devoted to the religion of Judaism. If you're devoted to it, promoting it, that defines your life. If you are kosher, if you're wearing a kippah all the time, if you're wearing a black morning suit, if you are a box boy with a box on your forehead and another box on your arm, you ain't coming. No religious dress up, no religious charlatans, no nincompoops. God hates religion, and it's a no-fly zone, if you will. Only those who have been misled, either politically or religiously, and can be cleansed by the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, will benefit from what he will accomplish on the 24th of September, this Shabbat in 2033. The event will be orchestrated, of course, by Eliah. He will have arrived on Passover in 2030. He is best known for excoriating and eviscerating the religious and the political establishment of Israel. He will return to form. He will speak out against all religious and political devotees in Israel, condemning them, just as he did once before. And then, because he's practiced and God likes his style, he will orchestrate the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah come Teruah. So this is what you have to look forward to. This restored mortal remnant of Yisrael and the returnees of the two harvests, Shabuwa and Teruah, will all be in attendance when Dowd returns. When Dowd returns, he is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. There is no Jesus. That is nothing but an overt lie. There is no Bar Kokhba or false Messiah in Judaism. That's all false too. Although Bar Kokhba actually existed, he was just a lie that was perpetrated on Jews by the father of rabbinic Judaism, Rabbi Akiba. But in the case of Jesus, no such person lived. It was simply a product of identity theft, stealing what pertains to Dowd. Because when Dowd returns as king of forevermore, he is returning as brilliant as the sun, according to Yahowah, and he is returning as Elyon, which you can interpret as all things pertaining to God, Elyon, or you can interpret as, with the yod in it, as all things pertaining to the hand and influence of God. In other words, he is going to represent God forevermore. And that's the more direct interpretation of the word. And so this is what we're expecting on Kippurim. Dowd will anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is in a known location, protected by a malach currently. It is likely in Yirmiyah's grotto underneath the summit of Moriah, and it will be brought out for this particular occasion, for that particular purpose. And then 5 days after Dowd's return, which is 10 days after Teruah, we will all enter the Millennial Shabbat. This will be now the 7th of October, because Dowd's return is on the 2nd of October, 6:22 p.m. in Jerusalem as the sun sets in 2033. 5 days thereafter, we begin the celebration of Sukkah. It will also, of course, be on a Shabbat, because God does his best work on the Shabbat. And this will be to a full lunar eclipse, so it'll be a spectacular day as well. And that is the time that in year 6,000 Yah, and the rabbis know of the 6,000 year plan, they just have no idea what happens, how it plays out, when it plays out, and what each of these days represent. And I've shared them with you so that you could know exactly what every moment of that 6,000 year period represents. But we will be allowed back into the garden. That's the reason the story of the garden was told to us, so we would know what to expect. No religion, no politics, no military. And it will be a marvelous time where the earth will be restored, terraformed, if you will, with all traces of religion and politics gone. So there we have it. That is what you can expect between now and then. Although I must tell you, it isn't really that simple, because this 8 years between now and that time in 2033, and that we're broadcasting here in the late summer months of 2025, are going to be hell on Israel. I mean, you know that. I mean, the anti-Semitism right now is at a higher pitch than it has been at any time in human history. Far worse than it was in the 1920s and 1930s Europe, as a result of the dehumanizing of Jews in the New Testament. Christianity is absolutely responsible for creating the climate and the culture that led to the Holocaust. And it was, a marriage between Marxists, the Nazis were Marxists, and Muslims. The Grand Mufti of Jerusalem meeting with Hitler in late 1941 is what turned the deportation, the exile of Jews, into the extermination of Jews. And now we're witnessing the exact same thing, because people are not very smart. We just do not learn from our history, and so it comes back to bite us. But it is now this uprising of Marxists in support of Muslims that are going to lead to a time for Jews far worse than that Holocaust. Rather than 6 million Jews being killed, it's going to be closer to 10 million as we have to endure what will be al-Aqsa flood 2.0, 1,000 times worse than the one that transpired on October 7th. Mr. Wookie, are you looking down there like you want to jump and get down, or you want to stay up here? Okay. So there you have it. We're, now you know what will be happening when. It's important that you educate yourself in this regard. Yahowah made it clear in Hosea when he signed the divorce decree, saying that he was divorcing himself of Israelites. He has left you. He will return, but not until you return to him. But it's important that you know that you have very little time left to get your relationship right with Yahowah. And it begins by recognizing that Yahowah has one and only name, and that you start using it, that you start celebrating it, that you revere Yahowah's name, and that you pronounce it correctly. And don't let anybody tell you that that isn't the correct way to pronounce it. It's obvious. Yahowah, I explained how to pronounce 3 of the 4 letters, and the very verb that he told us was the basis of his name, Haya. And Haya means to exist. I was, I am, I will be. And so Haya, which has the Yod and the He in that name, so Yah at the end of the word, and it gives you how to pronounce the Yah at the beginning and the Ah at the end. And so it only leaves 1 letter to properly pronounce. And of course, all you need to do to that is look at what was the name of the book that Yahowah introduced himself by name to Moshe. What was the name of that book?
The Torah.
The Torah, right, the Torah. And where does Torah get its O sound?
From the Wah.
From the Wah. And so you have rabbis cheating on the language by writing Torah, Torah, but that's not correct. Torah is Towah, so it's got the Wah providing one of the 2 vowels, and the He at the end provides the other vowel. And so it's really quite obvious, because no one's questioning the pronunciation of the O sound in Torah, that the O sound is pronounced as a Wah. Also, if you look at the single most repeated word in Hebrew, it'd be shalom. Guess where the O sound comes from in shalom? Yeah, it's the Wah. And a matter of fact, all you have to do is look at all of the names of people who had Yah in their name, and it's if it's a shortened version of it, it carries the O sound, like Yoel. Yep, that's how you figure it out. How do you think that when you read El and Elohim, it comes from Eloah, which has the Wah sound? There are not only hundreds upon hundreds of Hebrew words that define how to pronounce the Wah sound, and it is not a V. And if any rabbi tells you otherwise, it's from their Shoah deception. Shoah actually means deception. It's the very thing that Yahowah, and that's a system that the rabbis developed. They call it the Shoah system, and yet Yahowah, in the 3rd statement that he wrote in stone, told you explicitly that to Shoah his name, to diminish, to change, to alter, to negate his name, was an unforgettable sin. There's no turning back from it. So if you've been part of it and you won't say Yahweh's name, you pretend that God's name is Hashem or Adonai, then you're in deep trouble, because it's an unforgivable crime. So be aware. God's name is pronounceable. It is Yahowah. There is no B sound in the original Hebrew language. That is a latter corruption specifically from the rabbis to disguise the vowel sounds that comprise Yahweh's name. All 4 letters in Yahweh's name, 2 of them are repeated. Our vowels, there are 5 vowels and 17 consonants in Hebrew. I'm sure you know that, even if you've been told to deny it. But it's Yahowah, and you need to know that, because if you don't know and love Yahweh's name, you are not going to be among those who live with him forevermore. You will be among those whose lives end in no more than 8 years, if not sooner. So that's your reality. All right, we're returning to a situation with the waters of Meribah. Was a despicable situation at the children of Israel, and it's presented in Numbers, which is Bamidbar 20. It's one of the saddest stories in the whole Torah, but the fact of the matter is that almost all of the Torah is a sad story. There really isn't a time that Jews have been good. They have never been nice. They haven't been polite to God. They've never been appreciative to Yahowah. They have been embittered, calcitrant, angry, resentful, and nothing has changed, which is why Yahowah and Israel stand apart even to this day. One of the things I have just done, and it'll be published on our website soon, yadayah.com, is the 9th volume of a series called Yahowah. This happens to be the volume 5 of Yahowah. This is Harvest. This is 825 pages. It just so happens that volume 9 is also 825 pages. The core of the book focuses on the timeline that is and who the players are and the events of the last days. So you know exactly what's going to happen when. And we go through Daniel as Gabriel and Michael, both the men, tell Daniel as prophets what is going to transpire throughout time. And then from there, we go into the Torah, because as it turns out, most of the book of Bamidbar is prophecy. And for the first time, when you read this book and listen to it, you're going to recognize that the Torah is actually prophecy. That what is described in Bamidbar 5 with the adulterous woman is exactly what's going to happen on Teruah in 2033. And that Bamidbar 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 systematically go through this whole process of what's involved in getting Israel's attention. When you were so miserable, both Yahowah and Moshe gave up on you, Israel. And so God wants his people to know that that's who they are, and that it's essential they listen now, because that way, the way they are, the way they were, the way they are, isn't acceptable to him. He'll have nothing to do with you the way you are. And so it actually speaks of the way Jews were to present the way they are, so that you know that this time God's not playing around. You don't get a second chance again. You're getting a second chance. You're just not going to get a third. And that it explains who the players are. There's a prophetic presentation in Numbers 15 that talks about the role of the 3 men who are signified by the ram, the bull, and the goat. Be Dowd, Yada, myself, and Elia, and the role we play in the redemption of God's people. It even makes a mockery of the tassel, the tizzit that Jews wear outside of their garments as a tassel with a blue thread, because that's not what it is at all. It happens to be a blue flower, a flax flower, as a matter of fact, that is to be concealed inside the hem of a garment to only be noticed by the wearer. And with the flax bringing their attention to the first month of the year, which is Abib, and what transpires on Abib with Dowd fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. That is the purpose of it. And you're going to find that all of this is prophetic. Even the fact that in Numbers 12, when Miriam claims that she also speaks for God, God spanks that right down and says, the hell you do. And plagued her with leprosy, sent her outside of the community. And when we next hear from Miriam, it's in Devarim, and she is the example of divorce, of I will have nothing to do with you. It's a dramatic presentation in Devarim to end God's relationship with her forever. And that is symbolic of rabbis claiming that they too speak for God. And they're writing of their Talmud, God says, the hell you do. No. When somebody speaks for me, I designate them. I empower them, I enable them, and I make it very clear to them and anybody else that wants to know that they have been authorized to speak for me. And rabbis, you have not. Miriam, you have not. And of course, the rabbis love Miriam. They think that God was wrong to strike her with leprosy. And they think that the whole issue was over her criticizing Moshe's wife when it had nothing to do with Moshe's wife. had all to do with the very crime that rabbis are doing, which is to speak over Yahowah and to claim that they speak for him when they're not authorized to do so. So we're going to find that everything in the Torah is really prophetic, and particularly the book of Numbers. It just lays out the future. And in this case, we're now in the waters of Meribah, with the ugliest period of an ugly period during the Exodus. This myth that the Exodus was some fantasy and joyous time between God and the children of Israel, and that Passover was the doorway to historic freedom for the Jewish people. It's all hogwash. It's not what it says. That's not what the text says at all. And Jews just don't seem to get it at all. But they were miserable. Maybe that's why they have to change the plot, change the story, have to write their Talmud to speak over the Torah, because, well, the Torah says really bad things about Jews. God did not like you. You did not like him. He did not like you. So we're going to make all of that come alive, and you're going to see it played out as prophecy. So here is where we were in our review of 20 of Bamidbar, Numbers 20. And it reads, "And Moshe grasped hold of the staff from the presence of Yahowah in the manner which he had instructed him." Shabuwa, by the way, does not mean commanded. It means to provide direction and instruction or guidance. There are no commandments in Yahowah's Torah. Simply directions, guidance, teachings. And because Torah doesn't mean law. I know rabbis have corrupted that so that you have been led to believe that the Torah contains Jewish law, but there's not a law in the book. It contains what is based upon the verbal root of Torah, which is yara, and yara means source from which guidance and teaching, direction and instruction flow. Guidance, teaching, direction, instructions are not laws. They're things that you learn from. They're things that guide you. They provide instructions from God. And Sawa is related to that. Then Moshe summoned, along with Aaron, the contingent community to the presence of the sharp crag, Ha-Selah. As I shared in our last program here from our library studio, the sharp crag is an interesting term because it is Ha-Selah that was corrupted again by religious types to be a burning bush. It's not a bush. It's a sharp crag. And Moshe's case, when he met with Yahowah for the first time, it was a sharp crag of Mount Choreb that was ablaze, not a bush. And in this case, it's not a bush. It's a sharp rocky crag that would supply the living waters. And this was presented by Yahowah because it is prophetic of the last chance the children of Israel are going to have for life, because the rocks that comprise the Temple Mount are going to, when spoken properly by Elia at the time, are going to come forth with a deluging stream, dancing waters that will come from underneath and out of these rocks of the Temple Mount. And this will cascade down to cleanse the children of Israel because it will be mixed with the ash of crag. Yeah, that's my name. Yahowah has called me Yada. I'm his choder. I'm his Nakri, his observant foreigner. The last of the Zeroah ones cultivating the harvest. Clearly Dowd's Bashar Herald, the man from Edom, the Adamah Parah. He has a host of names, including even Palmoni. But the one that there's many of them that are in the Torah, including my Dowd. But in this particular case, it is the sharp crag. Crag is Celtic for my name, Craig. Godism is a trick. And so it is this sharp crag, the summit of Mount Moriah, that is going to provide the waters when Eliah speaks to them just before Yahowah ignites the fires. And, if you notice the story of Eliah when he was orchestrating the sacrifice of the bull, same animal, on 2000, which is 40 Obel, 888 years prior to the time that he will do the same thing on the top of Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, this on Teruah, you'll notice that the water came from people carrying it. And then Yahowah ignited the flames. This time Yahowah was going to provide the water. The water came from earthen jugs. The water is going to come from the earth. And Yahowah is going to release it when Eliah asks for that. And then Yahowah is going to light the fire just as he did 2,888 years prior, when excoriating the religious and political. That's one of the things that is just so weird about Judaism. There's a billion things that are weird, but they set a place setting for Eliah because, well, they've read the text and they know that, yes, indeed, I've done the math too. Eliah is returning on Passover. He's not returning on Passover meal. He's returning on Passover day. So they got that part wrong. And Eliah is not going to sit down with the religious. He's going to excoriate them and exterminate them, just as he did previously. He is not changing. God's not changing. Eliah condemned the religiosity of Israel. Read the story. So that's what he's going to do again. And he will be the master of ceremonies for what will be the greatest show on earth. So then Moshe summoned, along with Aaron, who is the alternative, the contingent community to the presence of the sharp crag. And he said to them, please, listen. Shema. It's been corrupted to Shema, and it has actually been turned into a prayer, which means to speak. When Yahowah never once asked anyone to pray to him, he doesn't listen to prayers. He asked the people to listen, just as Shema means to listen. Listen, those of you who are rebellious and embittered. This was the waters of Meribah, right? This means Marah. It's also the basis of Miriam's name. And Israel, you remain rebellious and embittered against God. You won't even say his name. You have denied the thing that matters most to him. What matters most to Yahowah?
His son, Dowd.
Right, his son, Dowd. And you have done everything you can to disown him. You claim to have a star of David. God, I heard a rabbi saying, no, I've been told that the Star of David is satanic, and that's not true. The Star of David goes all the way back to Exodus 25. And there you'll see that the flowers of the menorah provide that six-pointed star, and that is where it comes from. It's just utter baloney. What did Yahowah say the flower was to resemble? Do you recall? It's an almond flower.
It's almond, yes.
Do you know how many petals an almond flower has?
7?
Nope.
No.
And not 6 either. 5.
5.
So you can't get a 6-pointed star from a flower that has 5 petals, can you?
No.
So what he just did is lied. That's called a lie. No, there's no justification for the star. The star has nothing to do with Yahowah or with Dowd ever. And the star actually has a lot to do with Bar Kokhba, who is the false Messiah that Rabbi Akiba used, who's the father of rabbinic Judaism, to bring on the onslaught of Rome, caused Judea to be renamed Palestine. That's going to bite you in the butt, isn't it? And caused the diaspora, which led to the Holocaust. That was Rabbi Akiba and his false Messiah, Bar Kokhba, son of a star. That's where you got it. And it first appeared being used by Jews in a political and religious sense, as it is now, in the 15th century. and in Prague, of all places, in Europe, not in Israel. That star has absolutely no relationship of any kind with Dowd, David, with Israel, with the land of Israel, with anything God had to say, with anything that's important to him, and is only identified with the false Messiah, Bar Kokhba, and with the rabbis and their mythology in the 15th century in Europe. And that was the very symbol that the Nazis hunted Jews down and degraded and dehumanized them to wear a symbol and to make your national symbol, that which was used to perpetrate genocide against you, is really disgusting. And to then associate it with David and pretend that it is somehow godly is revolting.
In the occult world,
we're living in a cult world, man.
But in the occult, the hexagram is considered a more powerful symbol than the pentagram.
Yeah, the six-pointed star and the five. It's actually the five-pointed star that is satanic, not the six, but hexagram, a pentagram being different in this regard. But the fact of the matter is that Asher here is having a little trouble with her ears. The problem here is that there is no basis for it, and it's just another one of the lies. So he said to them, please listen, those of you who are rebellious and embittered, as Jews are today. Is it possible that from this crag, this rocky crag, that we will bring forth water for you? A question. Why would he ask a question? But God said, talk to the rocky crag and waters will gush forth, just as Elia is going to do, as that rocky crag is part of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah to purge the adulterous woman of Israel. That has nothing to do with sexuality. It has all to do with her religiosity. Prior to Dowd and Yahowah's return, he's going to speak to the mountain. The waters are going to come forth from the rocky summit of Mount Moriah. He's not going to, I can assure you, because I know Elia pretty well, he's not going to say, what do you think? You think it's possible that God's going to pull this off? There are things that are going to be cleansing waters. They're going to come from the Temple Mount. No, he's going to say, bring forth the waters. They're going to come forth. And that's really what Moshe should have said. Hey, watch this. God's told me to address this rocky crag, and that water is going to come forth. I'm going to do as he has instructed, and water is going to come forth. I don't know why he is providing you with what you are belly aching for, because you're miserable malcontents, but nonetheless, he told me to speak to the rocky crag and water's going to come forth. Well, he did, of course, because he was presenting a prophecy. Anyway, Moshe did not wait for an answer because the question was prophetic. So I ask you, do you think that God's going to honor the prophetic promise that from this crag, the waters beneath the Adamah Parah will come forth? And will they resolve the defiant and obstinate rebellion and bitterness of Israel 10 days before Yahowah and Dowd return? Then Moshe raised up his hand and he struck Nakah. He lashed out at, he attacked, he beat the rocky outcropping and crag with his staff. That staff was from Mat'eh, which is symbolic of the tribes which comprise his kin. Twice with 2 strikes, multiple times, representing the steps one takes in life. And abundant, massive amounts of high-quality waters came out. So the community of the Restoring Testimony drank, as did their livestock. Midbar, 2011. Even Moshe wasn't listening. Therefore, Yahowah said to Moshe and to Aaron, because you did not place your trust in me, and you were not trustworthy. For the purpose of demonstrating that I am unique, special, and set apart, exceedingly different, Kadash, to distinguish and separate me from that which is normal, common, and pervasive, and therefore from religious gods. Before the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore, the correct approach is that you will not bring the community into the land, which to show the way to the benefits of the relationship I gave to them. Everybody knows that. They just don't understand why. Yahweh says, no, Moshe, you're not going in. You're not bringing them in. Is a better way to say. It wasn't that Moshe wasn't going to be able to go in, because God gave him a tour of the promised land. He saw every bit of it. He said, but you're not taking them in. Why? Because if you're going to represent God in an appointed role before his people, you must listen, think, and then speak. You listen, you think, then you speak. Moshe obviously wasn't listening. He obviously wasn't thinking. And rather than speak to them, he lashed out at the rocky crag. Little did he know what the rocky crag represented. Then this conclusion, these are the Mayim, which means waters, Meribah, the waters of embittered contention. God wasn't just mad at Israel. He was frustrated with Moshe too. Of provocation and quarreling, of conflict and strife, and of willful rejection and deliberate betrayal. It's from Ma to question and ponder the implications of rib, contentious words, quarreling, complaining, controversy, and disputes. Where to show their way, Bnei Yisrael, the children who are contentious and quarrelsome with God, were contentious with and taunted, disputed and opposed, quarreled against and deliberately accused Yahowah. They did. And they still do. And through them, he demonstrated that he was set apart and different. Bamidbar, Numbers 20:13. How is it possible that the Israelites, who said that they would rather have died than continue to be religious with the rest of the Jews than live with Yahweh, who were clueless as to why they had been liberated and were oblivious to the message of the Torah, were allowed into Israel, while Moshe, the one who made it possible for the rest of us to know Yahweh and engage in this covenant, was excluded? Do you ever think about that? And by the way, it was only the under 20s who were now, could be as old as 60, but after the episode of the spies, everyone over 20 died. And there had been 40 years of wandering in the wilderness before they were finally allowed in. The answers are mirrored in the waters of Meribah, which served as a reflecting pool, one designed by God to reveal what the Israelites had become and what they have remained even to this day. Yahweh recognized that there was no reason to speak to his people because they were not listening to him anyway. Like the Jews today, playing religious dress up with their fancy weasel hats. There was no merit in reasoning with them because they were anything but reasonable. Like their religious descendants, there was no reason to judge them because they had already judged themselves and condemned themselves. The waters of Meribah is a story of unwitting self-assessment and of self-disclosure, leading to self-determination. It's the history of Israel. The waters of Meribah is a story of unwitting self-assessment and self-disclosure, leading to self-determination. It is Israel today, relative to God. But more than this, when we turn the prophetic clock forward 3,440 years from the end of this Exodus to the beginning of another, this one out of Babel, and we witness the waters flowing off the same stones of the Temple Mount rather than in the desert of Sin, we witness something quite similar. The crag turned Parah, productive bull, would be retired. His job, at least this phase of it, was done. His nefesh soul, like Moshe's before him, will then get an elevated tour of the promised land. And it will be left to Elia to restore the remnant of Yisrael based upon all we have done up to this point and what Yahowah will do with my Bashar body. So let's be clear. Moshe was actually being given a reward. It had been a rough go. He had quit. He had actually spoken up against God. He had done numerous face plants. He had made a bunch of mistakes. But all in all, it was an impossible job. God knew it was an impossible job. God knew that even he couldn't stand Israelites, and that Moshe was right and being disgusted by them. But Moshe stuck it out. He stayed the tour. He got them to the promised land. And God would take it from there, although reluctantly. Moshe was having the responsibility removed from him. He was being given what he had asked for. Please, I can't do this job. Please take these people away. Please kill me, rather than have me endure this agony of being besieged by them. His retirement party, after having accomplished the most difficult job the world had ever seen up to that point, almost as difficult as the one that I have been assigned. He did it as well, I think, as it could be done under the circumstances. Yahowah would give him the ultimate tour of the promised land, flying it behind him over its full expanse. And then he took him to heaven. His time hurting, bickering bozos was over. As the day of this writing, however, in the late summer of 2025, the last Zeroah's mission is ongoing. And he is now confronting those same malcontents. The waters of Meribah remain. So now that we have the proper perspective to appreciate the role of the Adamah Parah and the adulterous woman, let's return to God's depiction of Yisrael in the wake of the Adamah Parah's sacrifice on Teruah. There is hope, even for those who have long rebelled against Yahowah. We're resuming here in Bamidbar in the wilderness, Numbers 5:22. This is the beneficiary of this sacrifice and of these waters. It reads, "And the waters of the curse will enter and exit through your bowels to enlarge the womb. And the procreative power of the woman will give birth. And the woman she will say, Amen. Amen. I accept this information as reliable and true. This is trustworthy and dependable, acceptable and loyal. Now, there was never a situation where a woman was put under this particular test. It's all prophetic of Israel being put in this situation on the 24th of September, Shabbat, in 2033, year 6000, And then the waters that were representing the curse will enter and exit, washing her clean. Her womb will be opened again. She will be able to bear children and give birth. There will be many that will populate the Millennial Shabbat. No matter how many are cleansed on that day, there will be many because Israel will give birth again. Her womb will be opened. And this is true, oh so very true. Amen. Amen. I accept this information as reliable. In religious translations of these words, we read that the woman, who they claim will be disfigured, her thigh swelling and her belly bloated so it falls off, will be heard offering a pair of amens. But why, after being tortured in this way by God, would she say, this is reliable, this is true? Don't the religious read what they're saying? It's absurd. That's why I didn't translate it that way. Waters are cleansing. They resolve the problem of the curse. They open the womb of Yisrael so that during the Millennial Shabbat, there will be children born into the covenant. So in actuality, I was painting the cure for Israel's religious infidelity. Thanks to the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man who is a productive bull, her guilt will pass right through her such that, she literally cranks it out as if it was BS. Purged, washed away. Purged of this toxin, her womb will function properly again, and such that she is no longer bearing the stillborn. And that is why Israel is heard declaring, Amen, amen, I will accept this affirmation as reliable and true, such that I will now be loyal, trustworthy, and true. So write it down, then blot it out forever, eliminating the stench and the stigma of religion. This is intended. This is the result of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah of Numbers 19. The one acting in the role of priest, which will be Elijah, will write that which pertains to the curse of Allah in the record, documenting it, and then he will blot it out, wiping it away and destroying it, along with the waters of the disagreeable bitterness and poisonous toxicity. Do you know why he said Allah, Elah? Because rabbis created the curse of Allah. The Quran wouldn't have ever been written as a book. There would be no religion of Islam. This curse of the Dome of the Rock on top of the Temple Mount and of al-Aqsa Mosque being there as well are all a curse of rabbis. Rabbis in Yathrib sold Muhammad Talmud readings that he used to complete the Quran and make it appear religious as a text. A sand pirate, a man of no repute, a sexual predator, a rapist and pedophile, a man who was incestuous, a man who lived by robbing, enslaving others, who was the most disgusting reprobate ever to live, is now believed to be a prophet because rabbis gave him the material. The curse of Allah is rabbinic. It's the Talmud. The Talmud permeates the Quran. So that's why it's the curse of Allah that is being washed away. And at this time, that's really pertinent because, well, on October 7th, you experienced the curse of Allah. Muslims screaming Allahu Akbar as they raped, enslaved, tortured, murdered Jews. And the repeat of it, Alaska Flood 2.0, will be 1,000 times worse. So this will be very raw and personal. It is this day also that the curse of Allah, all of these Muslim mujahideen and jihadists, will be wiped away. They will all be incinerated. That is also part of this story. And so it is the curse of Allah, the stain of rabbis, that will be purged. Be goodbye to the Talmud as the source of the Quran. It'll all be blotted out, wiped away, and destroyed, along with the waters of disagreeable bitterness and poisonous toxicity. God's pure water from beneath the Temple Mount, with the cleansing property of the ash of the Adamah Parah and the searing properties of the flames that God's going to ignite, are going to purge the adulteress, this religious woman that is Israel, so that she's prepared for her Messiah's return with Yahowah, his father. With this now being the second mention of the curse of Allah, it is germane to know that Allah is Hasatan, the adversary, and that Islam will perpetuate the hellish conditions depicted in the time of Jacob's troubles. And since we're in the midst of being judgmental, and since the subject is women and them bearing children, and of Muslims killing them, I have a story to tell. Islam is so hideously disgusting that in 2014, when the Islamic State enslaved thousands of Yazidi girls, after raping them and then marching them for days without food, when these Muslim monsters finally offered them something to eat, it was the chopped up remains of Yazidi babies, the pictures of which they displayed after the meal. All is no better than the crap passed through the bowels of Israel. And as for writing down all that Allah has done to curse God's people and how that curse developed, Elia will be given the 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion. I'm quite confident he's already read them. Appropriately entitled for this purpose and previously prepared, just like Elia himself. This is volume 5, each 825 pages, each filled with citations out of the Quran and Hadith. The Quran put in chronological order with a literal translation provided via interlinears, with an analysis of every word because they're all Hebrew, bastardized Hebrew, with an eye to how rabbis filled the Quran with their Talmud stories. They're all reorganized chronologically, set into the context of Muhammad's putrid life, using the Hadith, particularly of Tabari, the history, and of the Sirah of Ishaq, so that you would know the truth. It's irrefutable. It explains exactly who the enemy is that has killed so many Jews over the centuries, the great enemy of humankind, the plague of Satan. I'll share this and we will pause our program and recommence tomorrow. This is from Bamidbar in the Wilderness, Numbers 5:24. And he should have what pertains to this woman drink the waters from the disagreeable bitterness and poisonous toxicity of the curse, and it will come and go with her. And these waters that bring the consequence of the curse of pungent and disagreeable bitterness. It will be over. This came upon her 3 millennia ago, but they will soon pass. The poisonous toxicity of Judaism is not long for this world. So lucky for the Haredi, at least they're dressed for their own funeral. We'll leave it at that. And we'll return to our story of Teruah. And then we need to transition also into what can be known about Yom Kippurim, because that is the next day to be celebrated on God's calendar. And I want you to know what it represents as well as what Sukkah represents and how these things are prophetic for what's going to transpire in year 6,000 Yah, 8 years from now. Thank you for listening to this opportunity to show the Torah as a prophetic book.